our viewers
You're
about
welcome.
this. I need to go to the Senate gallery where a bipartisan group of senators are about to announce their support behind a coalition of 34 senators to seek changes to the military chain of command on this sexual assault issue in the military.
But I want to thank all of the senators who have fought on this issue so hard. I want to thank Senator Boxer for her tremendous work on this issue and for being a tireless partner and leader in this effort on behalf of our brave members of the services. I also want to thank Senator Collins for standing firmly with us since day one when we introduced the bill, as well as Senator Grassley for being a true champion on this issue. I just thanked you. So I'll say that again. I want to thank Senator Boxer for her tremendous work on this issue and for being an amazing advocate, an unbelievable champion for victims, and someone who has worked so tirelessly from the very beginning. I also want to thank Senator Blumenthal, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Mazie Hirono, Kay Hagan, and Lisa Murkowski, who have been working with us steadily on the committee from the very beginning as well. Today I want to thank Senator Rand Paul for being here, for deciding to take a leadership role on such an important issue to really take this crisis head on. I also want to thank Senator Ted Cruz for his very steadfast vote in the Armed Services Committee and helping us lead this new amendment going forward. I think both of them are going to add deeply to this extraordinary issue that needs dramatic leadership and bold action. I also want to thank Senator Grassley again for being with us on the first day, for being the lead sponsor amongst the Republicans with Senator Collins. That early leadership made all the difference in the world. Now, our effort now is to build a very strong bipartisan coalition that is going to end sexual assaults in the military. And the way we want to do it is create an independent, accountable, military justice system that is not partisan, that is not ideological, that can create the kind of accountability and transparency that our men and women who serve in the military need so that they can receive justice. Our carefully crafted common sense proposal was written in direct response to what the victims told us, the stories that came from them, what happened to them, the fact that they didn't trust the chain of command, that they were retaliated against, that they didn't believe justice was possible. So this is not a Democratic idea. It is not a Republican idea. It is a good idea that meets the needs of the victims, creates transparency and accountability, and creates the needed objectivity that this issue deserves. So I want to now turn it over to others, and I will speak at the conclusion of my colleagues' remarks. We are now going to turn it over to Senator Grassley.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of this effort to build support for Military Justice Improvement Act. The status quo is not working, and we need to shake it up. If we don't crack down on the corrosive culture that this sexual assault represents, if we don't crack down on the individuals who use sexual violence as a means of personal power and personal gain, then we'll create lingering institutional problems that will jeopardize morale and impact recruitment and retention of troops. The bipartisan legislation introduced by our colleague Senator Gillibrand will give members of the armed services more confidence in the military system of justice. The reform will do justice to the U.S. Military Code of Honor, which is based on integrity and fidelity to the rule of law. Sexual assault is a law enforcement issue, and when young adults make the commitment to serve their country in uniform and put themselves in harm's way to defend and protect America's freedoms, they deserve to know that their rights will be protected, including access to justice, and not have that access to justice intervened by somebody who, for reasons unknown, may short-circuit and not see that justice is delivered. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you. Senator Boxer?
Yes.
Do you want to stand?
Well, if we have one.
We brought it.
Oh, thank you. I think it's better if you can see me. Is this be better? Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator. Oh, great. I am proud to be part of this bipartisan coalition for change. That's what we represent, change. Change that has been coming for 20 long years. And I'm here to say I've been in the Senate for that long time, and so has Senator Grassley, and we know, and we've seen every Secretary of Defense call for zero tolerance on sexual assaults in the military, and every time nothing happens. I want to tell you a story. I could tell you many, each of us could, that reflects why we have to do this. Stacey Robinson, at 19, joined the Marines for every right reason, how much she loved her country and wanted to put her life on the line for her country. She was asked out on a date by a sergeant. He took her to a bar. He drugged her at that bar. He took her back to the barracks and he raped her. He dropped her on the ground in front of the bar at 4 a.m. None of those facts are in dispute. I want to tell you what happened to Stacey Robinson and what happened to her perpetrator. I'm told it's Thompson, Stacey Thompson. What happened to her perpetrator? This stayed in the chain of command. The chain of command suggested to the perpetrator that he get his butt out of the military in order to avoid any consequence whatsoever. And Stacey, she was investigated for drug use from that night. She, after 10 years or more, she's coming out to talk about this story, which has scarred her forever. So do we need change? Yes. And what happened in the Armed Services Committee was some good, small tweaks to the system, which we strongly support, but the main change that was supported in that committee by Senator Gillibrand and her other co-sponsors here didn't happen. So I'm going to close just showing you quickly a couple of charts. In no particular order, it doesn't matter. Zero tolerance for sexual assault by U.S. defense secretaries over the last 2 decades. Statements by Secretary Hagel. It's not good enough to say we have a zero tolerance policy. We do. But what does that mean? How does that translate? Well, he should be supporting us. Secretary Leon Panetta. We've absolutely no tolerance for any form of sexual assault. Secretary Gates. First of all, I have a zero tolerance. Let's go to the next one. This really gets old very quickly. Secretary Rumsfeld. Sexual assault will not be tolerated. Secretary William Cohen. This goes to 97. I intend to enforce strict policy of zero tolerance of hazing, of sexual assault, and racism. Secretary William Perry. This goes back to 1994, and for all of these reasons, therefore, we have zero tolerance for sexual harassment. And lastly, Secretary Cheney, March 89. Well, we've got a major effort underway to educate everybody, to let them know that we've got a zero tolerance policy where sexual harassment's involved. It's enough with the words. It's enough with the empty promises. It's time for some real change, and Senator Gillibrand is leading us toward that change. 2 more much quicker charts. 90%. I want you to remember that. 90% of sexual assaults are not, underlined, not reported, because they tell us, and as Senator Gillibrand has said eloquently, we don't listen. They tell us they won't report it because they don't want to see it in the chain of command. And very last, look, this isn't something the senator pulled out of the air. Look at our allies. In Israel, since 1955, outside the chain of command. Canada, 98, outside the chain of command. Australia, 2005, outside the chain of command. United Kingdom, 2006. So don't let anyone tell you this is some idea that is so out of the mainstream. We are in the mainstream. the status quo is out of the mainstream. It isn't working, and I am as proud as I can be to stand with a coalition like this and just make a statement to those victims who are waiting for justice and to our colleagues who are looking at us and deciding. Please, please put your faith in change. Thank you.
Senator Rand Paul.
Get that out of the way, Rand. I'm sorry.
You know, I try not to look at issues from a partisan view. I'm sure I do sometimes, but I try not to. As a physician, I look at problems and I try to find solutions. I'm concerned, you know, about justice, and I want it to occur in the military for the victims as well as potentially those accused. Justice is very important to me, both for the accused and the victim. I'm concerned that victims of assault, though, may be deterred from reporting their assault if they have to report it to their boss. I'm also concerned, though, about interposing too many lawyers in the everyday life of the military and them getting in the way of the military mission. The vast majority of our soldiers are honorable and upstanding individuals. We're talking about a very small percentage, but if they commit crimes, they should be punished. In finding justice for the victims, we must make sure, though, that there's due process for all. Some say we have no bipartisan cooperation around here, and I disagree. I think this is a great example of how people from both sides come together and are willing to work on a problem and look honestly at, you know, what the problem is. So when I heard about this, my first impression was a positive one. As I looked at the bill, I asked, and Senator Gillibrand asked to come by and talk to me, and we talked about it. I thought there were one or two things that maybe were included in this that we should exclude from this. She was very open to the discussion, and it makes my support even stronger for this, is that there were a couple things we removed that weren't sexual assault, weren't murder. These were disobeying orders and some other things, and we said, you know what, we'll still leave that in the line of command. We're going to keep serious crimes, murder, rape, sexual assault in here. And I think it's made the bill even stronger. And I always thought the motive was good for the bill, but I think the bill's even stronger. I see no reason why conservatives shouldn't support this. The only thing I think standing in the way is just sort of the status quo. And Senator Boxer was actually right. Everybody says they're against sexual assault. Why don't we, if it appears as if there is some deterrence to victims reporting the crime, why don't we fix it? So I see no reason not to fix it. I'm glad to be part of the process if I can. Thank you.
Senator Tick, please.
Thank you. Sexual assault is a grave violation of the trust and duty that we owe our servicemen and servicewomen. When our sons and daughters sign up to defend our nation, they willingly anticipate facing hostile fire from enemy forces. But they don't sign up to potentially be subject to sexual assault from their colleagues. The Supreme Court rightly described rape as, short of murder, the ultimate violation of self. Now, every senator is opposed to rape, opposed to sexual assault, and wants to act to prevent it. And I'll tell you, having spoken with a number of our commanders, I'm convinced that our commanders in the military want to see this problem go away, that they understand, they have heard the message, and they are working to make it go away. But unfortunately, this problem has persisted. Despite good faith, repeated efforts, this problem has persisted. And I have to say, the process whereby this amendment has gone forward really underscores, I think, the way the deliberative process of the Senate is supposed to work. Because I entered the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on this matter really undecided. I think there were good and reasonable arguments by the chairman of the committee and by others about preserving the chain of command, about keeping responsibility in the chain of command that I think have real force. And I have to tell you, entering the committee hearing undecided, I was persuaded by Senator Gillibrand's exceptionally passionate and able advocacy. And in particular, there are 2 points Senator Gillibrand made that moved me and convinced me that this was the right and responsible thing to do. First of all was the point that the most persistent problem we've seen is an unwillingness, an inability to report these crimes, that the victims of sexual assault, for whatever reason, have consistently remained reluctant, afraid to come forward and report the crimes. And there can be no prosecution, there can be no deterrence if we don't have reporting of crimes. And despite all of the efforts that have been made in the past, Senator Gillibrand, I believe, made a persuasive case that keeping the reporting in the chain of command, as Rand said, having to go to your boss and raise the problem, the crime of sexual assault with your boss, has proven, in fact, to be deterring victims from reporting their crimes. And secondly was the point that a number of our allies, including Great Britain and Israel and Germany, have been implemented policies similar to this, and the results in practice have been that reporting rates have increased. I'm a big believer in following the data where they lead, and the fact that other professional militaries have been able to maintain discipline, maintain the chain of command, maintain effectiveness, maintain readiness, and at the same time improve reporting and improve deterrence, to me, was persuasive. So I am proud to stand with Senator Gillibrand, with all of the senators up here. I appreciate their leadership, and I'm proud to see the Senate working to fix this problem, to make sure that we protect every young man and every young woman who signs up to defend our nation, to defend our liberties, and to make sure that they have a safe, secure environment where they can trust their fellow soldiers and be secure from any threat of sexual assault.
Thank you. Senator Hirono.
It's okay. You definitely see the political spectrum of support represented right here. And I'm proud to stand here with not just the colleagues here, but there are others who are very much concerned and want to take some specific action relating to sexual trauma in the military. Yes, this has been going on for far too long. There is no magic bullet answer, but one of these answers and responses, we think, is to remove the chain of command from making the decision to investigate and go forward. On the other hand, there are plenty of other things that we need to do, because we are dealing with a culture in the military that has allowed this to occur for decades and decades. So the commander has a responsibility to change that culture. There's a whole huge prevention aspect that the commander should take hold of. There's our education opportunities. There are all of these other things that can happen. And the Navy is doing some of this, starting in a small way, where they address the incidents and the use of alcohol, which is very much a part of these kinds of crimes. So there are so many ways that we can address this, but this is one very specific way that we believe will result in more of these crimes being reported, and we think that that is one of the first things that we have to address. So I thank all my colleagues and, of course, Kirsten's leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful for the leadership of everyone here and the several other co-sponsors. I think we have close to 30 co-sponsors on this bill who have provided leadership. So we all know that our military is home to the best and the brightest in the world. And there is such a small number of criminals within our military that are undermining good order and discipline, undermining command climate, and destroying lives. And those are the individuals we have to find. These cases must be prosecuted, and they must be held accountable. And so I believe that when we look at this issue, we have to look at it from the eyes of the victims. And that's really what matters most, their stories. Now, for 62% of those who reported the crimes, of the 3,300 that were reported last year, 62% said they were retaliated against because they reported the crimes. Of the 23,000 that didn't report, more than about half said they didn't report because they didn't think anything would be done. Close to half said they didn't report because they saw someone else be retaliated against. Close to half said they didn't report because they feared retaliation. And that's why this kind of reform is so important, to be able to have that objective, trained military prosecutor be the decision maker. There may be less fear of retaliation, more hope of accountability, a greater belief that justice can be done. That's what this change is trying to accomplish. And I'm just going to read the story of one survivor to leave you with, because you have to imagine these crimes happening to your son or to your daughter. More than half of the victims are male in these cases. And until you begin to picture that in your mind, you are not going to understand the depth of destruction that is taking place in these victims' lives. One mother said, and she didn't want to divulge her daughter's name, she said, quote, "I reluctantly supported my daughter going into the Army, fearing that she may be a casualty victim in combat overseas by some foreign enemy. I never imagined she would be a victim on U.S. soil from the very Army she partnered with to protect the U.S. and our rights. She was sexually assaulted at the end of 2012, which is a case that is still pending. She's lost her lust for life. She's become dependent on drugs to mask the pain. And now she's being pushed out of the Army because the captain is derelict in his responsibilities and failed to respond to her plight. He has re-victimized her emotionally by exposing her to unsafe conditions, verbal abuse, and total disregard for her as a soldier or a woman. Help me, please." So that is what we are here to do. I want to thank all of my supporters behind me, but also all those who are not here with us for the press conference. We have to answer the call of these victims. Thank you.
Any questions on topic? Senator?
Yeah.
Senator Levin said this morning that his proposal to move these decisions further up the chain of command to the colonel level will take care of the problem of retaliation. What would your response be to that?
I disagree with his assessment, and just to be clear, I think Senator Levin cares deeply about this issue and is putting forward his best effort on what he believes will make a difference. But the reason why I think that change doesn't do enough is because of this. Right now, the commanders are putting forward cases that are reported and that their attorneys are suggesting should be prosecuted. Even sometimes the commander will say, let's go forward even if the prosecutor isn't sure. But that's only about 300 cases. And so if you're starting with 26,000 and only 300 are going to trial, if that commander's decision is being appealed, if he says no, that's not the problem. In fact, the commander and his lawyer only disagree 1% of the time. So that's 1% of 300 cases. It's a handful. That's not our problem. Our problem is not the disagreement between a commander and a lawyer. Our problem is, exactly as General Amos said, they don't trust us. They don't trust the chain of command. And so if the victims do not trust the chain of command, they will not report these cases. If they've witnessed other people reporting being retaliated against, if they've witnessed other people being shoved out of the military because they've reported these crimes, they will not trust the system that the chain of command has put into place. And so our only hope is that by making the system more objective, that is not dependent on that judgment, that decision by the commander, they will have hope and confidence that this objective, trained military prosecutor, and the training is essential because this set of prosecutors are trained for sexual assault and sexual assault and rape within the military. They know what the crime looks like, they know who the perpetrators are, they know how it's covered up, they know how they're retaliated against, they know the pressure that's put on the victim. So they're very knowledgeable. They know the law, and they know whether they can win these cases. So I want that trained military prosecutor, not any commander, because not all commanders will have the determination that we saw the military brass pledge in the last hearing. Not every commander is going to understand that rape is a serious, violent crime of domination, often not even related to dating or romance, more often related to dominance and violence and power. So you need someone who's trained and knowledgeable to make the assessment about whether these cases should go to trial. Create a system of objectivity so victims have a chance to see that justice could be done. That's why I don't think Senator Levin's solution will work. Yeah, go ahead.
And I agree that Senator Levin, they've tweaked the system and they've done some good things which we support and keep in the bill. I want to make a point because people get confused. They sometimes think what Senator Gillibrand and we do is take the whole thing outside the military. Now, there are some people that want that, but we don't go that route at all. We keep these crimes in the military, but with people who know exactly what they're doing. They're trained prosecutors, and they're objective. So I think it's an important point to make.
Senator Gillibrand, I'd like to invite Senator Blumenthal to say a few words.
Thank you. Well, let me just thank Senator Gillibrand for her leadership on this issue. I've been working on it for some time. with proposals such as mandatory punitive discharge, Victims' Bill of Rights, other measures that will greatly enhance the credibility and trust in the system, which is critical to reporting. And none is more important than the one that she has been championing for separating the prosecutorial decision, the convening authority, from the command chain. And I am very, very encouraged by the support that we are amassing. I see it in the response among my colleagues from both sides of the aisle, as is demonstrated today. And I think that we are making inroads all across the Senate, including on the Armed Services Committee, where I serve and she does, along with Senator Hirono. And I think that success is within sight. Whatever the threshold of votes that are required, I think that a majority and even 60 votes are within our grasp. So thank you to Senator Gillibrand for your leadership. Thank you.
Senator, just, this is, as Senator Hirono said, quite a cross-section of the Senate. Senator Paul, Senator Cruz, maybe you can give us a sense of how you were convinced to sign on to this. Was it meetings? Was it just testimony? What was it that brought you to this?
I think that what's lost so many times up here is people say there's no bipartisanship. Senator Gillibrand came over to me on the floor and just told me about it. I also saw the news reports about it, and my first impressions were to be favorably inclined to it, and then I needed to read a little more about it, and then there were a few little things I wanted modified to make it better, and she was very receptive to that. And it wasn't like a big deal to try to get the bill even better. And I think the changes they've made should bring more conservatives on board to this. And but I don't know. I really, truly don't see things in partisan purpose. I really don't see them that way. I'm more than willing to go against my party anytime or against the other party. We should go for what we think is right. This is an issue that I think is obviously right, and it sounds like we're all trying to get to a more just situation.
Thanks, Rand.
And I'll mention, as I described, that I was really persuaded by the argument Senator Gillibrand presented at the Armed Services hearing. I went in undecided. I have to admit, when I said that at the hearing and cast my vote supporting this amendment afterwards, I visited with a reporter who was, I think, genuinely astonished and said, "What, you mean every vote isn't decided beforehand and actually arguments can persuade?" And I said, "Well, I can't speak for every time, but I can certainly say here that, look, I think all of us, Republicans, Democrats, and I think also the commanders in the military want to solve this problem. And the question is, what's the right solution that will fix it, that will prevent sexual assault, but also maintain good order and discipline, maintain the integrity of the chain of command? And I think Senator Gillibrand has worked hard with a number of others. I think the suggestions that Rand made the bill stronger, and I was certainly supportive of those. And I think this is a common sense approach to fixing a problem, to make our military stronger and make sure we can stand by and protect every serviceman and servicewoman.
We have time for two more.
No, Senator Paul mentioned some changes that were made to the bill. The uniquely military crimes were an exception
Correct.
During the SASC markup. Has there been changes made to it since the SASC markup?
No. As the amendment filed, Senator Rand noticed 2 additional crimes that he felt were better dealt by commanders, and I agreed with him. I think his changes were smart and make the bill stronger. Specifically, direct order, which for whatever reason was overlooked. If you are given a direct order by your commander, you're not going to go call a lawyer to investigate whether you responded or didn't respond. That is not the appropriate response. And so he was very smart to recognize that and say that should be included in the 36 specific crimes that I believe, and we all believe, because we wrote the bill this way, are military in nature, that there's no parallel in the civilian system. So going AWOL, for example, is the most clear example. The military commander will be in charge. If you go AWOL, you don't show up for duty, he will decide what's going to happen to you because he knows what's going on, why you didn't show up, what's the appropriate response to either keep you in the military or respond appropriately. So he found 2 additional crimes that I agreed would be better determined by a military commander and not taken out of the chain of command. They were serious, but military in nature.
Okay, one last question. The Defense Department yesterday, the IG put out a report that showed really serious problems with some investigations of sexual assault and rape. It was like amazing discrepancies, like not collecting clothing, not
Correct.
re-interviewing witnesses.
Exactly.
I mean, your bill looks at the prosecution, but
Yeah.
they seem to have bigger problems than just what you're.
Well, that's as Senator Boxer said. This crime is. I mean, this challenge is pervasive. It is a cultural, top-to-bottom issue that needs to be looked at every step of the way. What we were able to do in the Armed Services Committee, we had a number of bills authored by many members of the committee and people outside the committee that would strengthen the process and help victims. So, for example, one bill that Senator Patty Murray and Kelly Ayotte were the lead sponsors on would assure that every victim will now have a victim's advocate. We included that in our markup, straight to the base bill, unanimously supported. So there's a number of reforms that I urge you to look at. We can actually summarize them for you. There's probably about a dozen really strong reforms that will help victims and help this process better. Also accountability in terms of what types of punishments and whether you're sent out of the military if convicted. Also better record keeping so that we can find recidivists over time. If someone doesn't report, we still have a record of the crime being committed. So there's a lot of reforms that will go to that. Go ahead, Dick.
You know, I think that's a very important question, and it speaks to the need for a trained, experienced prosecutor. I was a federal prosecutor. I served as state attorney general. Ultimately, the prosecutor can insist on standards and excellence in investigations. He is ultimately in charge. He's the one who has to present the case to a jury and make the case. So this proposal is integral to the entire justice system. And I might just go back to the question, you know, how can people who normally disagree come together on this issue? Criminal justice has never been a partisan issue. Under any administration, at any time, it unites all of us. Justice, and particularly criminal justice, effective prosecution, should not be about Republican or Democrat, and certainly not about ideological differences on other issues. So I think there's nothing surprising about thoughtful people coming together who may disagree on other issues.
Right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
That's big leadership. Thank you. Ted?
Congratulations.
Thank you for everything. Really. Good job.
Thank you.
Is that fun? Oh, by the way.
The Senate is in session. A Senate